18th, 2019 meeting of the Missoula Consolidated Planning Board, and we'll begin with the roll call.
Helen Jenkins.
Here.
Helen Jenkins is present. Dudley Imprada. Dudley Imprada is absent. Michael Houlihan.
Present.
Michael Houlihan is present. Stephanie Potts.
Here.
Stephanie Potts is present. Neva Hussein.
Here.
Neva is present. Jason Rice. Jason Rice is absent. Vince Caristo.
Here.
Vince Caristo is present. Andy Mefford.
Here.
Andy Mefford is present. Peter Benson.
Here.
Peter Benson's present. John Newman. John Newman is present. Mr. Chair, there are eight members and 2 alternates present. I'm sorry. There are 6 members and 2 alternates present. Would you like to appoint an alternate for voting member tonight?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, move on to agenda item number 3, approval of the minutes from the December 18th, 2018 meeting. Any changes to those minutes? I didn't see anything. Okay, seeing none, to entertain a motion to approve those minutes. Motion from Peter. Do we have a second? Seconded from Michael. Any discussion on the motion? Okay, seeing none. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay, none opposed. Motion passes. Move on to public comment on items not on tonight's agenda. I assume that folks are here for the agenda items that we have scheduled. If there are any comments on more general topics, now would be the time to raise those comments. Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to staff comments.
Hello, Mr. Chair, members of the board. My name is Chet Krauser, and I just wanted to take a quick second here and introduce myself. I am the new director for CAPS, and having started on the 2nd of January, I'm still getting acquainted, and so it's good to meet all of you. I'm sure that we'll be visiting plenty more in the future, so hello.
Welcome, Chet. Thanks for coming up and introducing yourself. Any other staff comments? Okay, we'll move on to the main event here, public hearings. We're going to switch things up tonight because our sense is that item B will go substantially faster than item A. So we'll start with item B, which is a rezoning request at 1900 to 1906 Strand Avenue and 1725 Grant Street, and that's a city item. And take it away, Andrew.
Good evening. Good evening. My name is Andrew Braun with Development Services. This is a request from Jeremy and Betsy Milliard to rezone 1900 and 1906 Strand Avenue and 1725 Grant Street from the existing RM 2.7 residential to RM 145 residential multi-dwelling. This is a rezoning that will result in a standard zoning district under Title 20, which cannot be conditioned. This is the location of the property. It is in the northwest corner of Strand Avenue and Grant Street. It is part of City Council Ward 6 and Franklin to the Fort Neighborhood Council. Here is a closer view of the parcel outlined in red. The property currently has 3 mobile homes currently in use and 1 vacant. The area surrounding the property has a mix of single, duplex, and multi-dwelling residential building types. The growth policy recommends a land use designation of community mixed use, which supports a broad range of commercial uses and high-density residential with a total of 43 dwelling units per acre. Zoning districts which closely align with the density recommendation is C1-4, C1-4, C2-4, and M1R-2. The applicant is requesting an RM145 residential, which allows 43 dwelling units per acre, which is consistent with the residential density permitted in the zoning districts referenced above. The city growth policy strongly emphasizes focused onward approach to development. This means it encourages denser development in areas that have existing infrastructure such as roads and sidewalks, water or sewer service, access to multimodal transit options such as mountain lion and bike paths, proximity to services such as schools and shopping, and a central location close to the urban core. The location meets all the criteria except for full sidewalk connectivity. The property will be required to construct any remaining sidewalks adjacent to the site at the time of building permit for future development. This slide shows the current zoning of the parcel and the surrounding area. As you can see, the majority of the area is zoned RM 2.7 residential, but RM 145 is half block east with a higher density permitted. RM 145 zoning request for the subject property would allow for 12 dwelling units on this site. Here are some of the views of this site as it exists now. The upper left photo is from the corner of Grant Street and Strand Avenue. The lower right is from Grant Street. The applicant states that the existing structures will be demolished and a multi-dwelling residential structure will be constructed. Now I look at the zoning amendment review criteria. These review criteria address whether the proposed change in zoning is in accordance with the growth policy, facilitates the provisions of motorized and active transportation facilities and other public infrastructure such as water and sewer, promotes compatible urban growth, promotes public health and safety, and considers the characters of the district and suitability of uses. Okay. The proposed rezone complies with the goals and objectives of the growth policy and comes closer in accordance. I'll wait for you. The proposed rezone complies with the goals and objectives of the growth policy and comes closer to accomplishing the land use designation in the area of community mixed use with 43 dwelling units per acre. The rezoning promotes compatible urban growth because it better implements the growth policy and encourages greater density in areas closer to the core. The rezone proposed development is compatible with the existing urban pattern of the area. And the rezone accords the promotion of public health and safety by being in an area that exists with public services, including public police, fire, emergency services, access to water, sewer, proximity to schools, parks, and Missoula's trail system. The rezoning gives reasonable consideration to the character of the district and suitability of uses, and are the same uses in the surrounding area. So, in conclusion, staff recommends the planning board approve the adoption of the ordinance to rezone 1900 and 1906 Strand Avenue and 1725 Grant Street and Section 29 Township 13 North, Range 19 West, from RM 2.7 residential to RM 145 residential multi-dwelling based on the findings of fact in the staff report. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. Would the applicant or applicants wish to speak about this proposal at this time?
Sorry.
Is the applicant present? Would they wish to speak at this time?
They're not.
Okay. Any public comment on this item? Yes, ma'am. If you would come forward to the microphone and state your name clearly, if it's difficult to spell in your estimation, if you would spell it, we'd appreciate it.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
My name's Kayleen Culverholm. I spell Kayleen C-A-L-L-E-E-N. And I am a resident at 1906 Strand Avenue. I live in one of those mobile homes. And I couldn't help but notice on here, and as we're going over the things that are taken into consideration, there's the human element on here that is not being taken into consideration, whether or not it's going to certainly cause the displacement of special needs populations. And I do qualify under two different categories of a special needs population, one being very low income, below poverty, the other having a disability. This is basically notification of we're about to incur thousands of dollars worth of debt. Not just the cost of moving expenses with first and last deposits, things like that. Our family consists of critters that have been part of our family for 9 years, nearing the end of their lives. It's the home that I brought my 5-year-old daughter home from the hospital to. So we've obviously in 9 years have accrued some things. So now we also have to find storage for some of the things that, I don't know if you guys know George Carlin, but the skit about stuff and how it just kind of accrues. But it also, we're legally on the hook for the trailer. We don't know yet if it's even going to be able to be moved. It was on the property for many years before we purchased it 9 years ago. So we still have to find out if it's even movable, and then if it would survive being moved and habitable if it were to be moved. And then if it can't be moved and we can't live in it, then we have to try to find a home. And then also, if it can't be lived in and we can't find a place, hopefully within Missoula County limits, because of the age of it, we can't move it within city limits. So we're faced also with uprooting my daughter from her family and friends. So the expenses, just to have it hooked up at this point, whether it's being hauled to the dump or to another location within 20 miles, would be just $1,800 for us. And I understand that once the permits are approved, and I have little doubt that they will be, that we have 6 months to figure out how we're going to make this happen. We've paid $325 a month. I won't find anything for 2 or 3 times that'll meet our needs within city limits. I'm on a waiting list for housing, but I'm still a good 1.5 year wait. I've been on the waiting list for over a year, but you guys, I'm sure, are aware of how the waiting lists work. You know, we try to save money when you're low income, but then you get a flat tire, you get a tooth that needs to be pulled because you can't afford to get it fixed, or so what I couldn't help but notice through all this, I mean, these are my woes, these are things that I'm going to have, it is what it is, and I understand that. But the human element is not in your review criteria. And 6 months, when you receive $1,200 a month to live on, and you can't go to work because you are on disability for a reason, they don't just hand that out. That's not much time to save up, potentially, if we are able to find a place, hopefully within Missoula County, to move it to, that will still allow my family to stay together. My daughter's an only child. The critters are kind of her siblings, and I'd like to keep all of us together. There's no apartments, and especially not in subsidized. So even if I were somehow to get bumped up the subsidized list, I would still be forced to potentially rehome part of my family. And that would be devastating to us, my child, and to them. One of them's nearing the end of her life. The other one's just a spaz and still has a lot to learn, but they're still family. And there are no resources. I've been looking since we received notice from the city, just kind of looking into what our options might be. And there aren't. I'm credit challenged because, like many people, someone loses a job, someone gets sick, your credit takes a hit, you're forced to choose what to pay, rent and utilities or your credit card bill, and well, next thing you know, your credit that you were working on has taken a hit again. So, and we live in a community where credit score really matters. And I want to bring up the difference between community development and gentrification. Community development takes into consideration your existing community, your existing population. Gentrification is to replace the existing population, and that is essentially what's happening all over Missoula. And our government is contributing to our homeless problem, and also simultaneously illegalizing it. We're being forced onto the streets. People think we deserve it if we end up on the streets. I've done nothing to deserve it. My 5-year-old child's certainly done nothing. We're poor. We're disabled, veterans, seniors, my neighbors. They couldn't be here tonight, one of them because he just had surgery. He wanted to be here tonight. And he was approved for his disability through Medicare. And they actually they audited it and decided to withhold his medical and go ahead and give him his monetary payments after an audit, after he'd been approved for the full thing. I mean, we're in trouble on so many levels, but it starts here in our community, and we're turning our backs on our most vulnerable, and I am among the vulnerable, but I still have a voice, and I plan on using it to the best of my ability. I've sat on the precinct committee for the Democratic Party for the Franklin 100 South. I chose to no longer sit on that. I now am with the Movement for People's Party. So this is why. And I mean, we're even having to entertain moving into a camper trailer. But then where are we going to stay? Where are we going to park our camper trailer, just so we can keep our family together? So I would really like for you to, like I said, I don't blame the Millards. I knew as soon as that little house caught on fire back there, that very night, that was it. I said, that's the straw. They're going to develop this property. And we knew that it's been, hovering for a couple of years. But the timing just couldn't be any worse. And we need something for it, because I've reached out, I've spoken to some folks who were part of the Cooley area who had to be relocated. Some of the folks that were on the 3rd Street that had to relocate. Some of them had to move clear out to Anaconda. Our lives are here. My daughter, her family, her friends are here. Her father's job is here. So yeah, I'm disabled. I can go wherever. But then does that mean I have to be separated from my child? Because I can't find a place within city limits that I can afford. And I don't know where I can move my trailer to if I can save up the money I need, because I'm also still on the hook for lot rent, which is every month. So I need to save up on top of my lot rent. And I'm telling you that every penny I have goes to the living expenses I have. I don't go shopping. If I'm shopping, it's because we need it. We need help. And there's nothing that I saw in here that considers the people that are being displaced, or at least provides some sort of path to, some resources, something. We may be able to sell some things to help with the expenses, but we don't have a lot. What we do have is modest, probably won't fetch a whole lot, but that's what we're faced with. And this is how we end up homeless. This is how we end up with nothing. I have my grandmother's ring. At this point is what I'm down to. And I know Grandma would understand. But I don't think that's what she would want. And I don't think this is the future she had in mind for her granddaughter or her great-granddaughter. That I might have to choose between keeping her ring or selling it so I can move, so I can still just fight to exist in a place that I love. So please consider the human element from here on out for ours and for future. I know you're phasing them out. We understand that. It is what it is. But consider the people that are going to be affected by this. And don't delude yourselves. Gentrification is gentrification. Community development is community development. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Very much appreciated. Additional public comments on this item before we close the public hearing? Okay, seeing none, we'll close the public hearing. And I just want to say at the outset, ma'am, I really appreciate you coming forward and giving us the perspective that you gave us. I wish that all of these decisions that this board makes, that various boards, commissions, representatives of local government could take the human element into account every time. And I think we try to do that within the bounds of what state law allows us to do. Unfortunately, we're limited. And I'm embarrassed to say that I don't know a lot about the city's efforts to address affordable housing, address the many serious concerns that you raised. I hope that the city departments that are tasked with those things are working towards solutions for you and for folks like you, because the situation you described, it sounds hard. And I just really appreciate you coming in and giving us that perspective tonight.
And also LAHTC Section 42 housing, although it is billed as tax credit, it benefits the owners and the property owners and developers. It doesn't really benefit something else. Yes, it's set on median incomes, but it still doesn't help the people who do it. Especially in a community where they require you to make 1 to 2 or a third of your you have to make 3 times what your rent is going to be. So I would need to make, say I was fortunate enough to find a 2-bedroom that allowed us to move in with our family. And say I was fortunate enough to find that for $900 a month. Most landlords would still expect me to make $18,000 for the students. And that's very, 27. So, it's a conundrum for sure, but it's a conundrum that we count on you guys on the planning boards and the city council and our government to help us figure out.
Thank you. Additional public comment? Or, excuse me, comments and questions from board members. Eva.
Question, Andrew. On page 3 of the report, the executive summary, item number 15, part of the rationale for making this change is that we're going to need new housing units. And I think what we've just heard is that we also need to preserve people's homes that exist now. I mean, and so there's often a tendency to say we need new, right? But we're losing housing with this as well. And so I guess I'd like you to explain the rationale behind that, behind displacing these people, and doing so at a pretty big change, it seems to me, in the zoning.
So the property owner has all legal right to do what they wish to do within the constraints of an adopted code. So take zoning or the growth policy, both align specific standards and allowances for each specific property, which allow them to either enhance or reduce the residential limits that are permitted. The topic of displacement versus new and expansive houses kind of spans outside of my purview, obviously. I know the city is working on a housing policy as we speak, and I believe a draft will be produced probably within the next month or so. And I think it touches on a wide range of topics, including both displacement as well as new housing to accommodate the need that we see today. So from a today perspective, I can't really speak to the need, the seeing of displacement versus the construction of new. We just review the projects as they come in accordance with our zoning code, the growth policy, and so on. Obviously, things can be done in the future if the community pushes it to amend the growth policy to cover topics like this. The housing policy could touch discussion items like this, which then can translate into code that we are able to use to both control some aspects of displacement and new and expansive residential development. Hopefully that was somewhat clear.
Additional questions and comments on this item? Helen?
So this question is outside the purview of this board, but out of curiosity, Andrew, do you know if the Millards have reached out to their residents on a more personal basis to discuss moving? Or was it just through kind of legal notice?
It was through legal notice. Obviously I can't speak to what they've done. I don't know if they've spoken. Obviously I don't think they really have based on the previous comments, but unfortunately, we do not have anything that outlines that they reach out to their tenants, but part of our rezoning application is that we both notice the tenants of all the residential units within 150 feet, as well as the property owners, so that everyone is fully aware of what is to come, which allowed for this public comment to be fully aware this evening, outside of our noticing on site.
Sir, if you would, just for the sake of the audio record, come to the microphone.
Hi, sorry. I was actually trying to find the exact Montana statute, but in searching throughout all this researching, I did see that there was something that said that the landlord themselves were supposed to notify us before applying for any permits. And this was the very first we knew of this meeting was the government notification of it. So we don't know anything. I did try to put a call into the Millards and asked if they had any ideas. They are in real estate. Maybe, they might be able to help us find something. And I didn't actually hear anything back. So many of the questions we have would definitely be for them, like, how are we going to make this work, and trying to work with them, maybe get a commercial dumpster, things like that. Maybe if it was because they are losing money, and like I said, I understand their side of things, and like he said, they have the legal right. It's their property. They have the legal right to hopefully do as they choose, and if that's develop it, I understand that. Doesn't make it easy, but it is what it is. So, but there was no notification, and because some of the residents, maybe we could have helped carry some of the burden of the money that they're losing, the revenue they're losing on the 2 vacant units, as opposed to having to come up with thousands and thousands of dollars each to move our homes. When maybe we might have been able to pay an additional, like they're losing the $325 a month on the one lot, and I don't know what they were charging for that house, but I think they've probably decided, from the looks of things, they've probably decided to just go ahead and scrap it as opposed to repair it after the fire that was done. But we would have all been, between the three of us, been able to pay a couple $100 more a month if that meant we didn't have to move our homes and uproot our lives. But none of these things were ever communicated with us. Like I said, the only notice we received was when we received notice from you, even though there is a Montana statute requiring the landlords to let us know before they even apply for a permit. I believe it's 15 days before. But we weren't going to press the issue because, like I said, we're fairly certain that this is something that, knowing if history is any indication and what we've seen around the city and other mobile home lots, it's obvious you do want to phase them out. There's a reason we can't relocate our trailer within city limits, because you don't want them within city limits. So it just stands to reason, because there's several more like us out there, and it stands to reason if this is going to be a pattern, that you put together something to help these folks, because most of us that are living in these are low income, are elderly, are veterans, because it's something we can afford on fixed incomes. We own our home, and then we rent the lots. So you're going to run into a lot of us as you're phasing out our homes and our communities. And we need somewhere to go, hopefully within city limits, if possible.
Helen, and then Vince.
Yeah, so Kayleen, I'm sure you've already reached out to Homeward, and I would encourage you to reach out to your Ward 6 City Council member moving forward with conversations both with the landlord and as well as with Homeward. And I thank you for your testimony.
Thank you. And like I said, if you could maybe add an item 10 to your considerations, and that be just a human factor, because that just, it's frightening when you open a letter like that and you see that nowhere on there does it seem to matter in all of this that there are people that are going to be displaced and about to incur thousands of dollars worth of debt that they have no idea how they're going to do it. It just is. So, thank you.
Vince.
So, Caitlin, I just want to thank you for your comments and sharing your perspective. I really feel for your situation. I wanted to ask a question that actually brought up at the end of your last comment. With the trailer park in the west side that was torn down for a new development, and then before my time here in Missoula on 3rd Street, and now this situation, it seems like there's a real dearth of places where people who own a trailer or need to rent one can place it. And, I mean, is it true that there's no zoning in the city that would allow trailer parks or trailers to be placed? Can you speak to that at all? And if that's true, does that mean, in your opinion, is that essentially a city policy that disallows that form of living, which, as she said, for $300 a month might be meeting the needs of some of the poorest in our community?
So, trailer parks fall under Title 16, which is a rather infrequently used title within Missoula's municipal code. You are permitted to put a trailer on any parcel. Sorry, this is. I believe if the lot was established prior to 1985, you are permitted to put a trailer on the property. There are rules and stipulations that come with it to assimilate the property into the overall area. So a concrete foundation, connection to city sewer, providing 2 vehicle parking spaces, must be newer than 1990, based on HUD standards. I apologize, I'm not 100% skilled on that section.
Well, thanks for trying to answer that, Andrew. I mean, I think I'll look into this a little bit more deeply. It does seem, I mean, as others have said, unfortunately, these issues are a little bit outside of the purview of what we're being asked to do here and what your department's asked to do, but potentially there does seem to be a gap, and maybe that might need to be looked at if we're at the same time, essentially pushing people out of the community with decisions like this, maybe inadvertently, but thanks.
Additional comments. Stephanie.
Okay, thanks. And I want to also thank you for your comments. I've been a resident of the Franklin to the Fort neighborhood for about 9 years now, a renter just a few blocks down from where you guys are. And I guess the thing in it, so it's interesting because my understanding of what we're allowed to consider here is pretty prescribed by what state law allows us to do. But one of the things that this looks at is whether the zoning considers the character of the district and its particular suitability for this area, and also sort of and I might be interpreting that wrong, but I guess I just wanted to express that Franklin to the Fort actually has a pretty unique character, and there's a pretty unique neighborhood feeling that goes on in Franklin to the Fort, and a lot of that is trailer parks, and a lot of it is some of these older community members who own their trailer and who live in that area. And I've seen, throughout the time of seeing people displaced on 3rd Street, seeing people displaced in other development that's come into the neighborhood, there's an increase in small, sort of, to some extent, high rent, smaller footprint areas. There's there's been a change in the neighborhood, and I would agree that we're seeing gentrification in the Franklin to the Fort neighborhood from people who are moving in from outside because that's where they can afford now. And I guess that's just something that I think is important for us to recognize is happening and to question whether just rezoning everything to like large multi-residential buildings is within the character of the Franklin to the Fort neighborhood. I was actually just talking with a neighbor about this past weekend. It's interesting because I hadn't seen this subdivision yet, or not subdivision, but rezone request yet. And we were saying it's really shocking how much the neighborhood is changing. And a lot of it's due to the building of these multi-residential buildings, which I understand we need more housing, but I question also, is that creating affordable housing? Are we actually making those at price points that people in the neighborhood can afford? And I think we're getting evidence that not always that's the case. So I'm concerned about this request.
Other comments or questions? Neva.
More question, Andrew. Would you mind putting up the slide that showed the current zoning and the location that you're proposing to change? And so you said, well, at half a block away, it's 145. But of course, everything around it is RM 2.7, right? So you could, how are you going to talk about this, right? It's one or the other. So why would we create this sort of like spot zoning right in the middle of this? Other than it's consistent with the growth policy. I appreciate that it's an attempt to increase density. I definitely appreciate that. I'm also conflicted because I also think we're displacing people who have existing homes. So I really want a clear justification why we should have one spot in the middle of this RM 2.7 that is a different zone. And I realize that you're kind of hamstrung because you're not representing this project. You're representing the staff.
So from our perspective, I would say this is not looking, it is more or less correcting the mistakes of the current zoning in terms of the zoning does not actually correlate or match the growth policy designation. The growth policy designation covers both commercial and industrial uses that include higher density residential. So by actually rezoning it, and it may be from a map considered spot zoning, it actually is better aligning with what is established. And we could see in another major rezoning, like we do see occasionally, that this area is reconsidered for a higher density residential. So we're not putting a full-on industrial zoning. I would say that would be more of spot zoning. I would say this is more or less correcting or at least trying to improve the relation that the growth policy has to the zoning district that's in place.
Yeah, and I appreciate that because the planning board has been asking development services to do just that for the, to update the zoning with respect to the growth policy. But we keep getting asked to do it on particular parcels, and it makes it difficult to kind of have a more overarching view. Thanks, I appreciate your comments.
Yeah, this is, this is classic. This is our issue. And I'm going to the LUP committee tomorrow at the request of John DeBari, and this is all I intend to talk about with him, is that, I'd be guessing, but I think that probably every single rezoning we've seen in the city, which is all of our rezonings, maybe some county rezonings, I can't really remember, to be honest with you. And it seems like every city rezoning, this is the issue, you know? And then we talked about it this afternoon that, yeah, this creates an island. I think that was a nuanced answer, and I liked your answer, that if it was a commercial or an industrial change, that maybe we'd raise hackles a little bit more. But nonetheless, I think like one of the factors is, does this benefit a particular property owner in the spot zoning test? And yeah, it does. It's consistent with the growth policy, which maybe, you know, counterweights that. But nonetheless, it's an island, and I'd feel way more comfortable if every one of those property owners in between RM 145 and the parcel were agreeing to the same rezoning change. Yeah, it's just tough. It's time to overlay the zoning map on the growth policy map and make them match in the city of Missoula. And I don't know, I mean, the amount of money that a city rezoning costs, I mean, it's like $5,000-$6,000 for the applications. At least that's what it was back in 2010 or 11. I know the fees don't change all that quickly, but nonetheless, I mean, it's people spending a lot of money to do what, at the end of the day, probably should be done for them, which is to match the two up. And it's interesting that we've got just the same questions back here again. So, Peter.
I'd like to follow up on previous question. So if we wanted, or if the city wanted, lack of a better word, ammunition to promote low-income housing as a zone in zoning, and say, let's create a zoning ideal that forced property owner to only build or seek low-income housing, however we defined it. Is it possible? Has it worked in other communities? Is it stayed away from? Can you address that issue?
From a Montana and the national standpoint, I only know of Bozeman, and they do have a mandatory affordable housing program that takes place during subdivision review, and a certain percent of the subdivision, if over, I believe, 10 lots, triggers automatic compliance. I do believe they have an aspect where you can do a cash in lieu, and I think it is based on the required value at whatever metric you're supposed to meet to what you sell it to, and that difference is required to be the cash in lieu payment, which is then used to help fund housing projects, and I think payment assistance. Obviously, I'm not super skilled on that one. Nationally, you do see it. It is, I think, a new thing in Montana, and I don't know specifically how you could establish, I don't know if you could establish rules that are specific to zoning districts and the requirement to follow. That would be something the attorneys would need to see based on state law, if that would be feasible or not.
You know, Peter, as you're describing that, I'm like envisioning like an overlay, and the overlay gets drawn based on proximity to grocery stores, parks, pedestrian facilities. So you're picking essentially properties that are that don't require an automobile, and those properties are in an overlay, and then within that overlay, certain affordable housing standards get kicked in, one of which could be incentives of some sort. I mean, I sort of envision like I have no idea if this is legal or not, but I envision like something akin to the MRA that, you know, distributes funds in URDs, except this particular MRA distributes funds to support the construction of affordable housing within this overlay that meets certain, I don't know. I mean, maybe that's exactly what the Office of Community Development, right? Is that Aaron's?
Housing and Community Development.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, that very well might be what we see. I have no idea what's going to come out. And
so I know, I obviously can't speak to it because I'm not part of that, but there are incentives, I do believe, listed in their proposal that if you do fall within X amount of an income level, you can qualify for these types based on what you're requesting with these requirements. So it's either a lien or something along that line for that specific property. I can't speak to the details. I do believe it will be coming available in the next month, but it's kind of the beginning look of what the city can do from a regulatory and possibly policy standpoint for affordable housing in Missoula. Mm-hmm.
Any other comments or questions? I will say, notwithstanding the great conversation we've had about this item, I'm going to support it because I do believe that yes, it's an island, I suppose, of a different zoning designation amongst the RM 2.7 zone. I think it's appropriate for additional density here. I think that that this amount of density wouldn't be out of character with that particular neighborhood. So I think this is an appropriate instance, of course, again, wrapping in all the concerns we've talked about. So if there are any other comments or questions, maybe we can move to a motion if someone's so inclined.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just add maybe to help with your discussions with the Land Use and Planning Committee. I mean, I feel like I've voted so many times to approve extremely similar requests in very nearby areas that it would be kind of inappropriate and unfair to everyone else who's come to ask for similar things for me to vote otherwise. But the discussion tonight has been very illuminating, and I think one of the things that we could get out of having a larger discussion on a larger rezoning is to be able to consider issues like this more fully, not on an individual parcel basis, but on a community-wide basis. So I would look forward to that.
Any other comments? Okay, if anyone's inclined to make a motion, have at it.
Well, I will make a motion to recommend approval for preliminary adoption. Wait, I'm sorry, is that the wrong one? No. Too many agendas. Approve the request to rezone lots 17 to 20 in Block 5 of South Addition subdivision from RM 2.7 multi-dwelling to RM 1-45 residential multi-dwelling.
Motion from Helen. Do we have a second? Seconded by Michael. Any additional discussion on the motion? Okay. Oh, Neva?
I can't decide because it does seem like this big windfall, right, to this person, this particular property. And in, I think, your comment about we've made similar decisions in the past to allow density, but I don't remember any incidents where it was going to actually displace people that were right there on the land. But I could be wrong. There were, so I feel I'm gonna vote against it because I think we need to look at the way that this gentrification process is playing out, and that this is not necessary. It seems to me it is a spot zoning, even if it isn't extremely different in the sense of being commercial or industrial. So I'm going to vote against it, and with some hesitation because I'm not quite sure what the right thing is here, but I think we're displacing people, and I don't hear anybody coming in and saying that they're going to find them a home.
Any other comment or discussion on the motion? Okay, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed?
Nay.
Okay, that's Neva and Stephanie. Neva and Stephanie opposed. Okay, the motion passes. Thank you, Andrew. Thank you very much. Well, could you tell me your last name again? Okay. Thank you very much. Very much appreciate it. And good luck. Sorry that this maybe isn't the most effective forum for this discussion, but it sounds like, and I knew this before coming into this meeting tonight, that this is very much on the fore in people's minds. I can attest to me personally, yes. Yeah. Okay, move on to the second agenda item for the evening, and that's the Missoula Area Mapping Project Amendment to the Missoula County Growth Policy, a county item. I'm going to say a couple of things about this item before we get going. I probably should have said it earlier. We have a court reporter in the room this evening taking verbatim minutes of the meeting, and so as if we were in a deposition, let's not talk over each other, be clear, speak slowly and clearly so that the court reporter can take down everything that everyone's saying. We'll have good, clean minutes from the meeting. As far as public comment on this particular item, seeing as we have a fair number of people here to talk about this, I'm going to limit public comment to 3 minutes. It doesn't sound like a lot, but you'd be surprised what you can say in that time. So if people would try and keep it to that length of time, I'll have a timer going up here, and please don't be offended if I sort of put the hand up and ease you out. Again, state your name when you come up to the microphone. If it's difficult to spell in your opinion, please do so. So again, we have a good record. And then the other item here, the other thing to consider is, and Andrew will speak more to this in a little while, we're going to open the public hearing tonight. We're going to hear the presentation. We're going to receive comment from you all, and then we're actually going to continue the hearing to our next meeting, which I believe is February 5th. The reasons for that, Andrew will explain, but in essence, it's to keep the public comment period open a little bit longer. So that's kind of the lay of the land here, and I'll hand it off to the folks at the county.
Yep. All right, thank you. I'm Andrew Hagemeyer.
I'm Christine DeSenza.
We're tag teaming this presentation. Can everyone hear okay? All right, that counts as your public comment.
Thank you, Andrew.
All right. So what we wanted to do tonight was we wanted to, we have a number of things. Do a quick review of the project to date. I see some new faces that hadn't shown up at one of the meetings or stakeholder groups before. So a review of the project and its purpose and how it's all played out. Some of the major themes within the land use map. We have a staff report we're going to present because this is an action item. And then we are going to hold the public hearing and take comment. So a housekeeping item, we had an IT issue this week pop up. We didn't notice it until Monday morning, but apparently the Missoula County server wasn't accepting emails from certain types of accounts like Gmail and AOL. And we, one of the portals for accepting public comment for this item that we were using was through email. And so we aren't sure how long that IT issue was in place, but we think it might have been from Monday, from the 14th, all the way back to maybe Wednesday or Thursday of last week, so a good 4 days or so. And because this is a public hearing and we want to make sure public comment is collected and people had their public comment accepted, that was the recommendation that we hold the public hearing tonight. We hear from the folks in the room. But then we do a little work starting tomorrow, getting the word out. Hey, if you sent in a public comment during this time period, you might to the email, we maybe didn't receive it, please resend it. So that way we give everyone a chance. Sounds good? Okay. So what is the proposed amendment? We're asking the planning board to hold a public hearing on an amendment to our growth policy, which was adopted in 2016. When we created the growth policy in 2016, we didn't update the land use map. It was identified as an implementation step. This is an implementation of the 2016 growth policy. We are updating the land use map in the Missoula area. So what we're asking you to consider is this land use element. It's the entire document that we've handed to you, and it's on the web and available for the public to see. So it's more than just the map, because the map has these land use designations on it, but then we have to describe what the land use designations mean. So there's got to be some text to it. So we have that text of what the land use designations mean in the land use element. But the land use element also describes that vision. So as we went through this big public process and talked to all these people about what they wanted the area to look like in the future, this is an opportunity to provide context to what that land use map looks like. And also we heard a lot about implementation strategies, and we don't want this policy document to just sit on the shelf. We want the county to try to execute it. And so there are implementation strategies in there as well. So the key events, there's been sort of 5 phases to this project. The first phase was setting the stage. That started about 2 years ago when we really dove into existing conditions and we looked at trends that were occurring in land use throughout the planning area. That was called the Planning Area Profile. We produced an informational document called the Planning Area Profile that is not a part of the amendment. It was purely to educate us going forward. And that concluded, that part of the process took about a year, and it concluded in March of 2018. We really wanted this land use map to focus on the community's values and that sort of be the foundation for the land use map. So in March of 2018, we started doing a bunch of outreach and having conversations with the community about their values and ideas on growth and development. And that was phase 2. So through that process, we were able to take the comments and we weren't able to create a land use map off of that, but we were able to start to identify concepts that people liked, had said in the first few rounds of outreach. And so we created a concept map that reflected what people had said. And we went back to the public. It was very general. And it just sort of had blobs on the map. It wasn't even all filled in. And we showed that back to the people that came to the meetings and said, this is what you said. You like the direction we're going. We got affirmation with some changes. We moved forward to create the public working draft, which we released in October of this year. And we had that out for comment for about a month and a half, and we had it available online, and we held some workshops on it. We got comment and feedback on that public working draft. And we wanted to have a public dialogue on the draft map and element before we came here for the planning board hearing. So we did that, and now we're in the adoption process. Now we have a public hearing draft is what we're calling it. And after the hearing, once you have made your decision on your recommendation to forward to the the county commissioners, we will have a final county commissioners draft. So public outreach, real quick, we had, throughout this process, we had about 15 public workshops, open houses, or visioning sessions throughout the community. They were located from anywhere from Bonner out to Frenchtown and everywhere in between. We had 3 rounds of online mapping where if you couldn't make it to one of the workshops or open houses, you still had the opportunity to participate through this interactive website. We asked similar questions, so we got similar feedback, so it was comparable. And then we had dozens of stakeholder meetings and presentations. I'm not really sure the number, but a lot. And also we had 5 planning board updates through this process. Am I going too fast? No. I'll give you a sec. So through this outreach process, we came up with these directives, these things that the public had talked about. For the values and the ideas on growth and development. And here's the list of values. These were themes, so there's more values to it than what I'm presenting here, but these were the themes that people identified. So they value affordable housing. They value using our existing infrastructure. They value agriculture, open space, multimodal transportation, our water quality, and preserving our community identity. And then they had ideas on how they wanted to see the community grow and develop, using cluster development, creating walkable places, planning for infrastructure, live, make, connectivity not only just between the community, but in terms of people being able to connect, having connectivity, but wildlife having connectivity as well. Rural character and avoiding hazards. So within that, we had these values and ideas, but we also had some realities that we had to deal with. Missoula County is growing somewhere between 1,000 and 2,000 people per year. It fluctuates. Within that population growth, we believe, a portion of those people will end up living in the planning area that we're working on right now. And based off of past development patterns, we believe that's going to be about 14,000 people in the planning area in the next 20 years. So it's a hefty number. It's not out of control. It's completely workable if we plan for it. We also have geography that is a reality that we have to deal with. We have all these rivers that crisscross our valleys and these mountains that surround our community, and they're some of the best things about living here too. I can when the planning board asks me to. I'm going through a presentation right now, yeah. So I'd like to keep this pretty structured because we have a lot of people here. Yeah, absolutely. So out of these ideas, values, and realities, we created some imperatives. These are the strategies that when we were drawing out this land use map, we wanted to make sure that we were recognizing. So we wanted to make sure the values were at the forefront. If you read this document and you saw these values, you could at least look at the map and say, yeah, I can see how these values might be interpreted in this land use map. We wanted to make sure there was a wide range of housing types and housing supply within the land use designations and on the map itself. We wanted to use the infrastructure, so focus development in areas where we have infrastructure, use the infrastructure we have, but we also realized that Missoula County is limited in the amount of infrastructure that we have the ability to control. Most of the infrastructure that is required for development, such as sewer and water, is not within our control, it's within the city's control. And so we are going to have to plan for some new infrastructure within the planning area to be able to accommodate this growth and development. And also, finally, we wanted to emphasize the quality of life. We are talking about maybe creating some new neighborhoods, primarily out at the Y. And we want that neighborhood that emerges over time out at the Y to be a good place to live as well, and have amenities and things that the rest of us already enjoy in the community. So part of this is what we've heard is this is just a policy document. The land use map. It doesn't do much on its own. It has to be implemented. And so we need to do some follow-up things. And that was very clear through the public outreach and our stakeholder meetings. Like, don't just adopt this, do it. And so we did end up creating an implementation strategy that focused on 3 aspects: codes, infrastructure, and coordination. So within this implementation strategy, we're suggesting that we work on updating our text, the text of our zoning regulations. We want our zoning regulations to align with the vision that we've created for the community. We need to update our subdivision regulations. There are some things we could do with infrastructure and get them in line with each other. And thus, we also want to update our zoning map. We feel like there's probably some opportunity to proactively rezone some of the areas within the planning area that have the infrastructure in place today to accommodate development, which is exactly what you were just talking about a minute ago. So we'd like to try to do that. It wouldn't affect the entire planning area. We would be very selective. But then there's also some unzoned areas within the planning area that we would also like to consider zoning as well. Infrastructure, we want to use infrastructure to proactively guide growth. And so we have created within the implementation strategy a list of potential projects that we could use to guide growth. It's a list of 8, 9 projects, and they're all theoretical. And we're not saying they should happen or shouldn't happen. They're just potentially there, and they could be used to guide growth. And we also recognize that infrastructure projects are really expensive and they incur ongoing costs, and so we have identified funding mechanisms to potentially complete these infrastructure projects and deal with the ongoing costs, recognizing that each one would have to be evaluated individually for its merits. And finally, coordination. A big part of this document, the big part of the vision that we created is that most people, and this was true throughout the entire outreach process, most people they understand there's a city Missoula and a county Missoula in terms of jurisdiction, but they identify themselves as Missoulians, whether they live within the city or not. And we created this idea that we're one community, and that Missoula County and the city of Missoula have different roles in managing the growth within our community. We're not going to call out what the city's roles should be, but we're going to identify what our roles should be. And so those are within that vision, that description. And so coordination is a huge part of this, of implementing this land use map. And there are places where we know as growth occurs, it's in the county today, but it's not going to grow in the county today. When it grows, it's going to be annexed into the city. And so coordination is really important. The Urban Growth Commission, which is a body that's sort of a shared resource between the city and the county, it's not the most active right now. We do think that maybe it could be more active to talk about coordination in a nice, transparent, public setting. The county and city do a lot of coordination, but it's not necessarily known by the public. So that would be a good public forum to talk about that. We also think suggesting the development of a memorandum of understanding between the city and the county that outlines the values or goals or objectives that the two communities, the two jurisdictions share, because there's a lot we have in common, but we don't necessarily focus on that enough. And I think the exercise of creating an MOU that focuses on what we share between the two jurisdictions would actually be super valuable. And it could also be used to help guide decisions or recommendations that the Urban Growth Commission makes, perhaps. And then finally, joint master planning. There are some places within the planning area that both the city and the county have identified for a long time as areas for future growth. And if we work together, the city and the county work together to do some joint master planning, identify infrastructure needs, kind of get the game plan set up ahead of time, we could really perhaps facilitate development in those areas in a much more efficient and better manner. And I'm happy to talk about that later on. So within the map, you'll notice we tried to incorporate some themes within the map to recognize the imperatives that we put forward, to recognize that we have a lot of these values that the community has identified that maybe aren't consistent with development. They do kind of clash a little bit. To sustain our long-term growth, we really want to focus on compact development patterns. And so a lot of the land use designations that we see, the big changes within the land use map from the previous land use map focused on density and compact development patterns. The difference between this map and the map that's in place right now, we do limit the expansion of low density residential areas, those 1 acre lots, the half acre lots, those types of things. There's already plenty of that type of development pattern available on the landscape right now. So we don't try to expand that. Those areas like Grant Creek, Upper Rattlesnake, Target Range, those types of development patterns, we try to focus on more compact development patterns. We also are really trying, through our open and resource recreation designation, really trying to protect our public lands, as that's kind of a theme right now. And we really tried to stay at the 40,000 foot level with this land use map. We didn't try to get down in the site-specific planning of property and using the map to try to show every little tweak and turn. We want this to be understandable. We want you to be able to look at it and see it and understand what that vision is in the community. It being usable from that perspective and not overly complicated is really important to people being able to use this document and the viability of the document over time. The more readable it is from a 40,000 foot level, we hope the more momentum there is behind implementing it. Our current land use map is a mess. 64 land use designations. You could not look at that thing and see what the vision of the community is within it. All right, now Christine.
Thank you. Yeah, so that's sort of the overarching guts of the project, I would say, and I'm going to just dive into the findings that are in the staff report. So it might be a little drier, but so today is the first of the public hearings, and then we have the county commissioner hearing scheduled, not scheduled. It will happen at a later date. We did run a legal ad in the Missoulian on December 30th and January 6th. Yes. Is this better? Yeah. Okay. And then we had additional outreach in those things on the screen. And we're also going to hold public comment open to see if we can capture anything else that we may have missed just in that county server issue. So the findings start on page 4 of the staff report and review the goals that were sort of the outline of the project from the growth policy. So we've got goal 1 from the growth policy to conserve vital natural resources. And this element and map update do that by identifying priority resources. So a lot of what went into that planning area profile, that sort of existing conditions report, looked into those resources that we do have in the area and identified things like agricultural soils, wildlife habitat, water, view sheds, and a functioning natural environment as some of those priorities. And we have 4 of the lower density land use designations that work together to conserve and prioritize those resources. So that's the open resource and recreation, agriculture, working lands, and rural residential and small agriculture. So those make up about 87% of the planning area, leaving 12.7% for that compact development and other things like commercial and industrial land use designations. So then moving on to goal 4, to reduce Missoula County's contribution to climate change. Again, echoing that compact development priority in the land use map and the element. There's a lot, like Andrew said, that this map and policy can't do, but we can allow for things to happen. And by focusing that development in areas with infrastructure currently and with those that access to multimodal transportation, we think that addresses a reduction in Missoula County's contribution to climate change. And then moving on to goal 7, sustaining and promoting land and resource-based industries in the area. So one thing in this land use in this update is it's the first time that the county will have an agriculture land use designation, actually, which is kind of surprises me every time I say that. But so we had 64, but none of them were exactly agriculture. And so what that designation did, it looked at the current tax assessments for land and the existence of prime soils, and then sort of verified those with aerial photography and identified those existing agricultural activities and land with potential for agriculture activities. So it combines prime soils, irrigation, infrastructure, and that current activity. And then goal 8 from the growth policy. Proactively plan and provide for the logical growth of communities while protecting rural character. So this is sort of gets at the real challenge of the land use designations and the update element overall. It's sort of that balance of all those values and priorities that exist in the county. There are a lot of them, and they don't all work together, but we found that, when you're, so we looked at where we shouldn't grow in those areas with priorities for resources, and sort of then we're able to focus on where we can grow. And the sort of thing that shapes that is where is the infrastructure, and building around where we have the infrastructure or where we can easily expand that infrastructure sort of allows that focus to take place. So those higher densities are recommended in areas well served, and one thing that does is sort of acknowledge that we've already put these investments into the community and sort of finding efficiencies to maximize that use of that infrastructure. Okay. And then goal 9, support the provision of infrastructure and services to and within rural communities. And one thing we acknowledge in the update is that infrastructure can change a community. It can change the neighborhood by increasing that density. You can have that effect and maybe unintended effects by bringing infrastructure in. So focusing on where it currently exists and can be easily expanded is sort of that balance that we're sort of hovering over in the county's role to maintain that rural character. And like Andrew said, we do have those implementation projects that are in the land use element, and those I think start on page 25 with those funding sources, potential funding sources and potential projects identified there. And one thing we want to do here too is emphasize that coordination, and that's another way of doing that is between public and private sector partners and strategies to bring that infrastructure to places that are seeing that growth. And then goal 10, here we go. Providing opportunities for a wide range of housing choices. This is clearly a very relevant situation in the city of Missoula and in those edge areas that are covered in the planning area. And again, so this doesn't attempt to solve the affordable housing issue in the area, but it does allow for a variety of housing. Every type of housing, from single-family homes in larger lots to more dense multifamily housing, is provided for in the planning area. So we've got more multifamily in the land use designations in the map than we did before. More areas for multifamily housing. And then we also have a tool, the density bonus, that's provided for in, I believe, 5 of the land use designations. And though that would sort of incentivize protection, voluntary protection of resources, so ag soils and wetlands, things like that, or if a landowner were to provide a public service like a trail or easements or things like that. So sort of a long-term perpetuity conservation or provision, then they could potentially see an increase in the number of units that they could develop on their property. So trying to financially incentivize that protection and make it make sense for the landowner. That's sort of how we address that housing choice and options in the land use map. And then goal 11, the last one, the goal is to reduce the safety risks and costs associated with hazards. So wildfire, flooding are the most relevant ones, prevalent ones in the planning area. And one thing we do here is, so floodways, floodplains, and wildfire are the main hazards in the planning area. And we definitely steer growth away from those areas. So let's see if we've got the map. You can sort of see at a glance that we're steering development towards the valley and away from those edge areas and away from the river. And one thing we do is with the floodway and floodplain is potentially decrease or discourage development in those hazardous areas in a way that's more clear to the landowner. That's our aim anyway. So that's all the goals that were identified in the growth policy. Our conclusion is that the update is warranted and that this update would achieve those goals from the growth policy. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you, guys. Appreciate it. Okay, we'll open it up to public comment. Again, if you keep it to 3 minutes or so and state your name at the outset of your comments, and we'll hear what everybody's got to say. Come on up, Mr. Kaufman.
Thank you, John. You seem to occupy a presence in the room. It's nice to see you. For the record, my name is Nick Kaufman. I'm a land use planner with the engineering firm of WJM Group here in Missoula, and today representing Grant Creek Crossing. You should have a letter in front of you. Looks like this. There's a couple pages of text and then pictures on the back. So if you go to the first picture on the back, you can see the property that I'm talking about. That's the intersection of North Reserve Street and Interstate 90, and the property is just west of that. So west of the hotels like Ruby's and the Marriott is Grant Creek. And this property is between Grant Creek, right, and the upper terrace, which is Westview, very back page of your letter. Okay? It's 80 acres of property. It was part of the old Phillips Ranch, Interstate 90 and Reserve Street when it was expanded and encroached onto the property. They sold the property to the east side of Grant Creek, and that's been developed with hotels and motels and hospitality. This piece was used for gravel extraction and mining for probably the last 30 years. Most of your sidewalks in Missoula, a lot of your curbs, gutters, and driveways are probably made of gravel that came from this area, excuse me, and some of the streets you drive on. Our specific request tonight is that this 80 acres is designated in the land use map as neighborhood commercial. We would like to have it be designated community mixed use. We feel that that 80 acres adjacent to the interstate and Reserve Street serves a region which is the northern portion of Missoula. That northern portion includes the Missoula County Development Park out to the west. It includes all of the industrial area over to the east side of Reserve Street, the residential areas in and around the area. It certainly serves the workforce in that area, and it also serves the residents in that particular area. The land can be used for a number of particular land uses. Primary among those is Grant Creek. The current growth policy in the county calls for open space along Grant Creek and calls for light industrial on the remaining 80 acres of the property, while the city growth policy calls for community mixed use, exactly what we're asking for instead of a neighborhood center. 80 acres for a neighborhood center seems like an awful lot of land. So along the bottom areas, a park along Grant Creek, but that park would serve a larger community. It would connect to the Grant Creek Trail that goes up north of Interstate 90 and to the proposed trail along the south side of the interstate, which connect to the land uses to the east. The northern portion of the property along Interstate 90 would be for hospitality uses. Adjacent to the creek along the west side would be for high-density residential uses. Okay? The inner portion of the property would be used for technology and light industrial. Perhaps some mixed-use retail uses adjacent, so park, high-density multifamily, mixed-use and office spaces, perhaps a grocery store, right? So the whole property, because of its connectivity in terms of the multimodal transportation system of trails, Reserve Street, Interstate 90, it connects this particular piece of property really well to the developments to the east and west and to the residential properties to the south. And it has the opportunity to provide for workforce housing, as well as provide for the needs of the residential community, as well as the workforce that's established there, as well as contributing land area to provide jobs close to recreation and close to housing. So in a nutshell, if you could see your way clear to think that this is one of those properties that Andrew talked about that requires coordination, because to develop this one, we need city services. The city growth policy is identical to what we're asking for, right? And if you would consider upgrading this, if you would, to the community commercial instead of neighborhood center, we would greatly appreciate it. Right.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, John.
Appreciate it. Sir.
Hello, greetings. Matt Dreesen, principal at DeSmet. If we can take a look at the land use map. One, I'd like to say it was a pleasure working with Andrew and the planning board at CAPS for the last couple of years as we went through this. DeSmet is located right at the end of the now city property there at Butler Creek. And if we go west from that all the way up to the Y, which is going to be that red dot in the upper left-hand corner, you'll see that that land in there around Broadway is all zoned light industrial. Now, we would like to have a long discussion about community development in that area. There's a couple of issues. We have a node of residential that's now in there just north of the airport, and we also have just west of that, we have more residential that's put in there, and we have light industrial in between that. That makes for an unhealthy travel pattern between our students and from our students to our school. And so those things we'd like to have a discussion on in more detail with the planning board at CAPS, with the city. It's kind of a mess out there right now as far as the planning goes. We'd like to have that area kind of marked as not necessarily in stone, but let's have a good talk about that. As Mr. Kaufman mentioned, there's some areas that we could use some joint planning on. This would be one of those. Is that clear with the area I'm looking at? I'm making sure.
Yes, sir.
Yeah,
At least to me.
Yeah. Okay. Questions?
No, I think we're good for now. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Rice.
Forgot my timer. Give me the nod.
Started.
Jason Rice with Territorial Landworks. So I had submitted written comment as well, but I also wanted to kind of supplement that today with a couple things, which are some photos and an updated, corrected map. So the properties that we're looking at are over along Highway 93 near Blue Mountain. There's some areas that, and I've met with Andrew and Christina, and they've been great, to work with here. And I think I kind of got to, I don't want to speak for them, and they can probably answer questions later, but that floodplain area was what a lot of that green area was based off of. And some clarification has been given to them now about the yellow in the floodplain that I submitted the maps with my original. And we've actually done mapping on those properties, and they are all outside of the 100-year floodplain. All of those yellow areas, actually there's more than what the yellow shows that's outside. So understanding that the basis for the agricultural designation for those areas was based off of the floodplain, and thinking, well, it's not developable because of the floodplain regulations. That's the way it went. So when you bring it back to what's really there, these areas are predominantly already either developed or zoned, and so there's an area that's ZD 43, which actually has a business on it, and there's an area that's ZD 43 commercial. I'm sorry, that was agriculture. And then there's an unzoned area that's developed out as commercial. And then as you head towards Missoula, there's a ZD 39, and that area is currently zoned as 1 per acre residential. And so I actually represent that property, but the entire area I think needs to be considered because this is a growth policy. And oops, that was the last one. Sorry, I was seeing how my thing worked. What we have is the growth policy would drive future zonings, and these parcels are either zoned already or developed already, and they're outside of the floodplain. And so the photos that I submitted to you show you the Blue Mountain Clinic, which is on the ZD 43 agriculture. And so I think that the point that I'm trying to bring home is that we've got an area that is already developed or zoned commercial, and if we designate them as the agricultural that's on here, they will remain zoned the way they are, because no landowner will bring it forward and devalue their property from a commercial designation or zoning to an agricultural zoning. So as you move forward, then you have an unzoned area, and they will never bring forward a zoning because they're developed out already, and you can see their photos that are there. And then you get to ZD 39. If we end up with a designation that's currently proposed, they would never bring a rezoning forward. They would just stay ZD 39, 1 per acre, because that's what's going to give them the highest value for their property. The growth policy doesn't drive a lot of the other land use decisions. We feel that since this is a growth policy, we should be looking at that. We shouldn't be, saying commercial, residential, then commercial again. We should be looking at all of it as kind of being contiguous and similarity. You drive into a community, do you want to see kind of this hodgepodge of, one commercial thing that's, got a zoning district with it, a zoning that, then you have a commercial development that doesn't have zoning with it, so there's no controls. They can kind of do whatever they want as far as they can get a floodplain permit and a septic permit, and then one that's residential. So to us, it doesn't really make sense. What the kind of residential that end up next to a highway, next to a commercial zone, probably isn't what the community wants or needs. The final comment I want to make is, in our conversations, we weren't sure if we were going to be heading towards just taking the areas that are in that 500-year towards that, but we really strongly encourage you to go to the property boundaries, because floodplain permits, there are things that are allowed in the floodplain, but the floodplain permit, so for something that's ancillary to the use that is outside of the floodplain, that would be in the zoning, may not be permittable and bring the full value of that commercial to the district, because the floodplain permit can't be issued if it's not in compliance with the local zoning. So it has to be, when you get a floodplain permit, it either has to be in compliance with the growth policy if there's no zoning, or the zoning if there's zoning. That's the final stop. So we believe it should go to the property boundary so that it can bring in the full value. The floodplain regulations already regulate what you can and can't do on those properties. So even the proposed language in the commercial center, which is what we propose, says the ability to achieve the higher densities may be limited by site considerations such as lot size, setbacks, floodplain, and slope. So they already take into consideration there may be floodplain on that area. And then in addition, in the agriculture one, they made the note that the floodplain was the primary reason for a lot of these areas being designated that way. So I'll be at the next hearing as well to answer questions, and I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thanks, Jason.
Good evening. My name is Fred Stewart. I'm a member of the Target Range Homeowners Association Board. We've been involved in this process since the time that it started. We got off to a real rough start because the CAPS director, Pat O'Haron, told me I couldn't go to the meetings that were made up of county staff, developers, and real estate agents. And the county commissioners took care of that pretty quickly. And so people were able to go open to the meeting, so we were able to keep up with what was going on. I submitted some written comments to you, and there's only two that I would like to emphasize just a little bit more. I'm assuming that the Target Range Neighborhood Plan land use map, which was approved by the county commissioners in 2010, would take precedence over this particular project in those areas where there might be some discrepancy. And in general, almost everything in this project is consistent with the neighborhood plan. And there's just one area that's a little bit different, and one of them is on page 35 of the land use element, it states that the residential density for this rural residential ranges between 1 unit per acre and 2 units per acre, and that's accurate. And the reason that we want to point this out is because there's a lot of difference once you get to 1 per acre and 2 per acre in terms of septic. And in the Target Range area, we don't have septic system in place. So it's pretty important to know where that boundary line is. And in the neighborhood plan, we're very specific about which part of the area covered by the neighborhood plan is 2 per acre and which part is 1 per acre. And we acknowledge the fact that at 40,000 feet, you don't make that kind of a distinction, but there is more detail at the neighborhood plan level, and we just want to be on record that that's the case. The other one that I wanted to point out was on page 35 of the land use element. Talks about density bonuses may be available if development is clustered. And in the neighborhood plan, we talk very specifically about using conservation design as the method to determine how properties may be located in such a way to protect the resources that are at risk. And having more housing is not the resource that we're trying to protect. We're trying to protect the water quality, the prime agriculture soils, and the visual landscape and so on. So we've identified those resources that are important to preserve, and we want to use conservation design as the way to come up with how properties would be positioned, and density bonuses were not part of what we were interested in when we put the neighborhood plan together. So I will stop there, and I'll make a final comment that Andrew may have developed a new standard for planning, and he didn't pay me to say this. We started off a little rough also, but he really has listened time and time and time again and worked through the details and some of the crotchety people that he had to deal with. So he really did a nice job of listening, and we very much appreciate the effort that he put into this. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Stewart. I agree. We like Andrew, too.
Hello. My name is Torrey Ritter. It's Torreyritter. I was hired back in September as the new non-game wildlife biologist with the Montana Department of Fish, Wildlife, and Parks here in Missoula. And we appreciate the opportunity to comment on the land use map and land use element. So in early 2019, we gathered a bunch of people together in our office representing a lot of different expertise on fish and wildlife resources in the Missoula Valley. So we had our area wildlife biologist, Liz Bradley, who's also here in the audience as well, our regional manager, Mike Thompson, who is also here, our regional bear and lion specialist, our fisheries biologist, our regional comments coordinator, the regional supervisor, and then also the non-game wildlife biologist that was here before me. And basically we put up, and we also had a member of the Five Valleys Audubon Society there as well. And basically we put up this map on a big board just like that, and we zoomed around and we made circles. We all gathered all of these comments together, basically relating to fish and wildlife resources and the potential impacts that on those resources that, you know, as Missoula expands into county lands, we basically made comments on the potential impacts of those resources. And what that resulted in is this fairly large and comprehensive document that I'll make sure everyone on the planning board gets. I'll work with Andrew to make sure you guys get this document. But it has some sort of overarching principles that we thought would be important within this planning effort, and then also much more specific recommendations down to the polygon level, but also taking that sort of 40,000 foot view. So for this meeting here, what I really just want to emphasize is kind of the three overarching principles that we wanted to emphasize to sort of guide development as Missoula expands, to be able to accommodate those fish and wildlife resources that really make Missoula a place that people want to live and want to recreate and want to access these resources. So the first one of those big three guiding principles is really the protection of our riparian areas, our stream corridors, and our wetlands. These are sort of the biodiversity hotspots in western Montana and really throughout the West. A really disproportionately large number of species use these riparian and wetland areas, not only for nesting and foraging habitat, but also to move around within these ecosystems. And as Missoula expands, being able to accommodate those riparian areas is extremely important. And I know, you know, that the concept of riparian buffers and streamside setbacks can be kind of a thorny issue. But we really want to emphasize just how important these riparian areas are. It's the conduits for both fish and wildlife and our recreational resources. Second thing we really wanted to emphasize was protecting the grasslands around Missoula, particularly the North Hills and the South Hills around Miller Creek. These are really important winter range for elk and mule deer, which not only provide wildlife viewing opportunities, but also hunting opportunities and other recreation opportunities in the Missoula area. But they're also really imperiled habitats throughout western North America, and particularly in western Montana. We don't have a lot of grasslands. We have plenty of forests. Grasslands are a little bit of a rare ecosystem, and there's quite a few bird, small mammal species that are quite imperiled, but really rely on those grassland habitats. And then finally, we really want to just emphasize the idea of allowing for permeability and connectivity as Missoula expands out into these county lands. And that really harkens back to those riparian areas and those stream corridors. Those really are kind of the final pathway that animals, lynx, bobcats, bears, mountain lions, coyotes, foxes, all of these creatures have to move across the valley and to connect to all of these big wild mountain ranges and all of these river corridors that we have that really make Missoula this special place. Being able to maintain those corridors is going to be vital to maintain that connectivity between these ecosystems. So those were kind of the big three things that were just we thought was really important and really kind of percolated throughout every little smaller recommendation that we came up with. So again, I'll make sure you guys get this document. Given that we have a little bit longer of a period for public record, we may update a portion of this, but I'll make sure you guys get this document. And this basically identifies 10 sort of specific areas that we're really concerned about in terms of Missoula growing into the future. So thank you for the opportunity to comment.
Thank you much. Appreciate it.
Thanks. Okay. My name is Bruce Benson, Benson. I farm the Benson property at 7th and Reserve and the property at 301 North Davis Street, which are in the Missoula County. I have reviewed the map and believe several items need discussion. These properties are listed on the map as neighborhood residential. Current zoning of the western part along Reserve Street of 7th Street is Special District 2. This district was created before the Reserve Street Bridge was opened to serve as a buffer from the busy street to the residential zoning beyond. It requires setbacks, landscaping, and other features to serve as a transition from the busy street to residential. Most of the properties along Reserve Street have been developed meeting this special district requirements. I believe to map this as neighborhood residential is an error. I grew up here when it was a dairy and sugar beet farm. We have made great efforts to keep it a productive farm. Recent impact from wildlife, which is deer, urban density, which is traffic and trespass, have threatened the viability of this operation. This proposal causes greater stress to continue farming here. Deer have been an issue by destruction of growing crops and fruit trees. New food safety rules require that produce around animal droppings not be picked. I have been in contact with Montana Fish, Wildlife, and Parks to find out ways of dealing with this issue. We have tried many deterrents, most recently fencing. We still have not been able to curtail destruction. I do not believe encouragement of deer is a good idea in this area because they attract mountain lions, which can also consume dogs, cats, pigs, and children. Development in this area of a higher than original zoning is without consideration for impacts. Our property has been dumped on, blocked off, tunneled under by unauthorized trespass in the course of higher density. Costs to us include property destruction, legal fees, and a great deal of personal stress. Traffic has increased without additional roads. I need to travel with farm machinery between fields. It is very dangerous to move slow, awkward implements down busy Reserve and 3rd Street. Only briefly mentioned in this map is roads. I see a very inadequate effort in planning of transportation for current and proposed map projections. Before the Reserve Street Bridge was opened, a series of meetings was held to discuss impacts. I recall the question of what happens when Reserve Street meets its capacity. The answer, another bypass would be needed. This question was asked 40 years ago. 20 years ago, Reserve Street exceeded design capacity. I do not know of any real effort to plan for future traffic increases. This map needs to address roads to service the increased population projected. I feel I am using this property for its highest and best use by farming. Over the years, this operation has been able to survive in agriculture by adapting to different crops and practices. Looking forward at this map, I feel you only have wildlife and agriculture as boxes to check off to complete this document. Challenges to be a productive agricultural operation are real. Please be serious and consider the issues I have brought up. One further note, I'd like to thank you for providing the text and thing. I cannot understand anything verbal that is said in this room.
Thank you for your comments, sir. Additional public comment.
Good evening. My name is Bonnie Buckingham, and I'm with the Community Food and Agriculture Coalition. And I'm here this evening to voice my gratitude for the many hours that have been put into this document. The CAP staff have been very transparent and available to discuss the elements, gather public comment, and stakeholder input, and meet with folks in their own neighborhoods to get specifics on what the communities want. They've been responsive to the information they've gathered, and I've been impressed with the depth of the document as a planning tool. So thank you, especially to Andrew. As you know, CFAC has spent the past dozen years or so working to keep the conversation on agricultural soils conservation at the forefront of planning in Missoula County. For the first time in this long conversation, we feel that we're being heard and that it's being taken seriously and we're making some headway. This land use element and map with designations specifically recognizing the need to conserve agricultural land shows the commitment on the part of the county for the first time to conserve our best soils and recognize agriculture as the asset that we know that it is. During the recent open space bond and levy campaign, folks overwhelmingly supported a bond which included funding for the protection of agricultural land. I feel that this land use map works to highlight some of the areas most at risk of development and most viable for agriculture in the future. And these tools combined will help maintain our agricultural heritage and provide for a stable, resilient food supply when needed in our future. And now, along with other planning documents, such as the Climate Ready Communities process that was just started, our Missoula, the city's growth policy, the Missoula County growth policy, and the open space bond and levy, among others, we as a community are developing tools that will provide mechanisms for the conservation of agricultural lands into the future. This land use map complements all of these other policies and can provide specific planning strategies for growth. As recommended by the report, there is now a need to put this element into the county growth policy, update the zoning map, create zoning that aligns with these land use designations, and update subdivision regulations accordingly. Our hope is that you will recommend this element be put into the growth policy for Missoula County and that we can begin to explore and adopt the mechanisms needed to protect our most vital soils across the Missoula Valley. There are a few areas of agriculture where it's very prominent in some of the neighborhoods, most pointedly the Target Range and Orchard Homes areas. And it's in that path of most development, most desirable development, but also really currently supports a lot of small farms. This community is working very hard to be recognized as an agricultural community and a source of agriculture. There are 2 farmers markets weekly during the growing season, several farm stands on individual farms, U-pick operations scattered throughout the neighborhood. And while this area is shown as rural residential, which does allow for agriculture on the map, it would be more true to their neighborhood plan to instead designate it as a rural residential with small ag. And additionally, I just wanted to point out the clause within most of the designations that state that density bonuses and cluster housing or conservation design tools can be used to increase density while preserving the best resources, including agricultural soils, among others. And there may be need for additional policies that will support these developments before that can happen, both at the local level and possibly even at the state level. So I encourage the county to work quickly to ensure that these policy changes happen so as to take full advantage of this planning tool, providing much needed housing while preserving a resource that will serve our community into the future. I look forward to continued work with the city and the county to utilize the map along with other planning documents to ensure that as we grow as a community and into a larger city, that we do so without compromising the vital asset of these fertile soils. So I strongly encourage your support of this land use element and map as a tool for the conservation of ag lands and a sound planning document to be used as we plan for the future growth in our community. Thank you. I also have a letter that was given to me by a Target Range farmer. Would you like me to read that, or should I submit it online instead? What would be your preference today?
So defer to the county folks. Would you rather have a hard copy of that than have it read into the record, Andrew?
It's from Red Hen Farm.
Yeah, okay. I think either way it would be in the record. If it was submitted electronically, you guys would get it at the next meeting, and we'd have plenty of time to evaluate it. Or if you want it read in the record, I think it's your choice, really. Yeah.
It basically says that they're grateful for this effort and that they support it, and that they also would like their neighborhood plan reflected in this, particularly in the areas of zoning. And the rural residential with agriculture would be their preference. I won't read the whole thing, but I will submit it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Additional comments?
Yeah, my name is Andy Hayes, and I'm a member of the Evero-Finley-O'Keefe Community Council, as well as the Missoula County Weed Board and the Open Lands Advisory Committee. But I need to make it clear that I'm not speaking for any of those groups. I'm speaking for myself, and I'm speaking for myself about experiences I've had in the last 3 years with agricultural policies that have come before the board. And so after the failure of a land use policy in June of 2016, working groups were established, of which I was a member of one of the primary working groups, which was the Conservation Development Models Working Group. There may be several people in this room that were part of that working group also. We met 14 times during the spring and summer of 2016. We developed I don't know, about 6 or 9 page report that was sent to CAPS. CAPS then consolidated all these working groups to another report that was distributed a couple of years ago. And to go back, first I'd like to thank all of you people on the planning board, because I know how much time you spend compared to my little hour and a half on the weed board per month and hour and a half on open land. So please accept my thank you and appreciation for your time to listen to all these people and spend the amount of time you do with these different county projects. And I got to thank Andrew too, because I became acquainted with him at Snowball Ski Area when I found we had a pretty common friend named Andy also. But again, back to this working group. I would have to also ditto what Bonnie said about, what a great step I think we're taking to help try to preserve agriculture in the Missoula city and county for the future. But I had one concern. I tried to read this entire document and scanned through a lot of it, trying to pick up some things that I had heard and had experience with. And one thing that came up on a lot of these different elements that I was concerned with, and I have some documentation I'd like to read to maybe, this is totally to help Andrew and you maybe refine and see a little issue that I see reoccurring here, and that's density bonuses and cluster development. And it shows up in working lands, rural residential, small agriculture, rural residential, and residential, which, from my interpretation of the map, are all outside of the city limits of Missoula and outside of the water infrastructure of Missoula. During our report, for the Conservation Development Models Working Group, a portion of the report done by an individual, Colin Bangs, who might even be here too, but I appreciated his expertise in this, called our attention to basically the failure in the ability to use the density bonuses or the cluster development standards on this portion of county land that's not supported by infrastructure. And I will cut and paste a couple pages out of these reports and send it electronically as a comment so you can better analyze it. But I'd just like to read just a couple of the things that came up there. And it's the density bonus section can only be used if it is connected to a public sewer system. With the exception of the Lolo Sewer District, that would mean you'd have to annex into the city of Missoula and be ruled by city zoning. That effectively eliminates the density bonus as a viable tool for agricultural land outside of the areas that are supported by this infrastructure. Cluster development standards do not lend themselves to ag land conservation for a number of reasons and need to be rewritten.
Sir, you're at 5 minutes.
Okay.
You're at 5 minutes and 20 seconds.
Holy cow. Okay, so I won't go any further, but we understand CAPS has tried to correct some of these things, and I'll submit the exact verbatim wording to you guys and the county. Thank you very much.
Perfect. Thank you much. Appreciate it.
Sorry for taking so much.
No, not a problem.
Thank you for taking our oral comments. I'm Lee Bridges. I'm the chairman of the East Missoula Community Council. We have sent you in on electronic file. Andrew has it, and we'll be supplying it to you. We've submitted a comment, a page-long comment to you, and I'm not going to reiterate what's on that. I will be here for my own personal perspective. We've been working with CAPS since the inception of this land growth project, and we're really grateful because I'm in one of the unzoned areas of East Missoula. We're really proud of being unzoned. However, in reality, we're looking at the next span of 10 years when we can be annexed. And when we are annexed by the city of Missoula, we will obviously be zoned. Therefore, we appreciate the fact that the county has come to us and permitted us the opportunity to work with us and understand that we have a very independent and unique community. We don't want to lose our identity. The county has listened to us and has worked with us very well. And I can say for all of East Missoula, we've worked with the county on this for years, and they have allowed us to create a live-make designation. A lot of us, I'm a stakeholder out there. I've been there for 35 years. A lot of us are property owners who have our own shop businesses, small businesses, cottage industries, that sort of thing. What the live-make, and this might help answer your question, sir, what the live-make designation is, and it hasn't been completely written up in text, and I will be helping with that as well. But what they're allowing us to do is live and work on our residential sites, which we're grateful for. That doesn't mean great big retail industry or anything like that. That just means small home industries. I personally have a sheet metal shop. I know people who have automotive shops, welding shops, computer shops, that sort of thing, and that's what we're talking about, small-based. I'm really grateful to have the opportunity to have that land use designation. I know that's going to assist us in our further process as we go into the zoning end of things before we get annexed. I think that our letter that we are submitting says it in a lot more detail and will help you understand. I just want to say personally, I very much support the work that CAPS has done. They've been great listening to us and helping understand what our community is about. I know that the Z word is a bad word in a lot of communities, but we're trying to change that now to where the zoning word in East Missoula won't be met with a firestorm. We'll be a lot more accepting of it because of the way this live-make helps us maintain the livelihoods that we embrace there and being able to support ourselves. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you very much for your comments.
Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the board. My name is Dwight Easton. I represent Missoula Organization of Realtors. Dwight Easton with the Missoula Organization of Realtors. I'm their public affairs director. Our organization represents members who support policies that promote home ownership and private property rights. We want to express our appreciation, like so many have before us, for Andrew and the staff and what they have done putting this together. It's been yeoman's work. We'd like to specifically recognize Andrew for the time that he's given to the numerous listening sessions, the meeting, seeking all kinds of feedback, and providing presentations to groups such as ours, and trying to integrate all the various interests that you've heard tonight about this policy and this mapping project. Moore supports the adoption of the Missoula area land use map and elements of the amendment to the growth policy with an additional amendment. We'd like to point out that and have the board note that the proposed land use map provides only 6.5% of the planning area to be designated as residential. And what I mean by that, or higher density. And that would be to the tune of 3 to 11 units per acre or higher. Home affordability in Missoula area is a recognized problem. Significant limit in land that can be used for residential development increase the costs of the parcels that can be developed to higher densities. Additionally, designating areas of growth that have limited current infrastructure generate additional costs and challenges to creating affordable development. I have provided a letter to the board, and I think you have it. We are saying, we're looking at this plan and we're looking out, the last one was 40 years, the land use map. We're talking in terms of the next 10 to 20 years at least. So this is something of a visionary document. We're promoting the idea that options should be available. We'd like to see a little bit higher residential options, the ability to have a higher density in some of those areas that are closer into the city. So we'd ask the board to adopt the plan as amended to designate the area encompassed by South Avenue to Clements Road to 3rd Street as residential, up from rural residential. This area has substantial infrastructure such as hospitals, the high school, and public transportation, as well as a general proximity to existing municipal water and sewer lines. The designation of rural residential unnecessarily limits the options of property owners in the county to provide housing close to existing services with considerably less cost to the community. We believe that providing the option of increased density close to existing services, transportation, and infrastructure is in the community's interest. We thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Hello, my name is Lisa Thomas. I'm a resident of East Missoula and also on the East Missoula Community Council, and have been part of the process as a council member newly this year and as a resident previously. Specifically, I would like to speak in support of this in terms of how it reflects East Missoula residents and how we have spoken to this project, and specifically to the neighborhood center designation for the Highway 200 at the beginning of the highway, and where we would have businesses, residences, shops, things like that. Currently, I can drive my car to the mechanic and walk home. Beautiful. I can currently stop and get gas, milk, such as those things. We would love to see a small supermarket, but we have some of those emergency groceries also available walking distance from my house. One thing we don't have is a safe pedestrian area on Highway 200. And with the current Highway 200 project coming in the works, if you have seen that, with lighting, crosswalks, sidewalks, and all of those things coming to that part of Highway 200 in the near future, this document will work very nicely with those improvements that are coming. And coming with East Missoula, with that, in that area, would also be sandwich shop, pizza shop, potential brewery restaurant coming in. There are currently apartments going in there. We have tiny homes already there, things like that. There's a lot happening in East Missoula, and I think this document is coming out ahead of some of that in a nice way, particularly for that Highway 200 corridor ahead of that highway, which will bring in a lot of nice improvements for our area and our neighborhood, and it dovetails nicely right next to that live-make area with commercial and then smaller commercial right next door to it. So basically speaking in favor of this and looking forward to East Missoula continuing to be a beautiful place to live. Thank you very much.
Thank you much.
My name's Juanita Vero, and I just wanted to jump in real quick and echo like deep appreciation and gratitude. And I know my friend John over there might have some more critical suggestions, but I just wanted to again thank CAPS and Andrew. Where is it? Okay, for this kind of Herculean effort, and that really, I think this amendment is so timely, and we're ready for it, and that. I mean, it really hits, he does stay true to all his three pillars that he wants to reach at, the one community approach, our values and our ideas on growth and development and realities, and I mean, it really does just hit it, and I appreciate the 30,000-foot view, and it is totally accessible. I can talk about this plan in the elevator, and that is awesome. So thank you, Andrew. And just makes me super proud and grateful to live here in Missoula County. So keep up the great work. And I think also this amendment ties in well with the climate resiliency project that is in the works. And I think that's important to mention. So thanks for that. Okay, John, you're up.
My name is Gary Matson. I'm a 52-year resident of West Riverside, which is in the Milltown area. And I support the land use map for the Bonner Milltown area the way it's shown. I especially like the live-make designations. A number of live-make facilities and residences are already in the area that's designated for that, so that is appreciated. I think the East Missoula folks invented that, so we're happy they did. I requested future versions of the map. This is kind of a picky-unique point, but if I look at the map, I can't tell the difference between open space and industrial. The colors are so close together, at least on my computer, that they don't look any different. So that's kind of a picky point, but one that I would like to see changed in the future. One thing that doesn't necessarily isn't the purview of this board, but I've heard Andrew talk about it, and I agree with him. And I support a more proactive approach by the county to both zoning and infrastructure development. I don't see initiatives for these important elements developing in our neighborhood because of any initiative among the residents. And I think that there are areas that desperately need some guidance, and it's the development is kind of hodgepodge because there's no one that's kind of leading the charge to make something consistent for our community. Random developments, such as more storage units, are more likely without zoning and infrastructure, and particularly without centralized wastewater treatment, which we badly need, and I don't see that happening if it's up to us. I support efforts to attract developers who are interested in building single-family neighborhoods. I don't know if zoning could be an incentive for such developers, or if there is an appropriate level of promotion that could be done by the county. But we have an area that is kind of going hodgepodge, that we desperately need neighborhoods and in some kind of a community sense that doesn't happen when you get storage units. So I do appreciate your efforts, and thank you for the time, and I do really appreciate what Andrew has done and the CAP staff, and I thank them for their endurance. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm hearing from fellow board members that after this comment, I think we're going to do a little 5-minute stretch.
Is this on? I'm Jim Cusker. Have lived in Grass Valley, upper part of Grass Valley for the past 80 years. Consequently, I have noticed more than just a minor change in the agricultural numbers and production here in the valley. The first thing I would like to do is join the increasing chorus of folks who have come up here and said, Andrew, Christine, you guys have done a marvelous job. I attended one of the meetings, one of the first meetings they had. There were 3 or 4 people there, but they went all out for those of us who were there. And of course, they can handle groups of 50 or more really, really well. There are several things I would like to thank them for. Once again, this will be the first time that that agriculture is designated in the planning process as one of the prime ways to use our land. I appreciate that a lot. As you look through the elements, however, you will notice that agriculture is not mentioned just in that one element by itself, but it is mentioned in 4 other elements as well. Those elements are open resource and recreation, working lands, rural residents and small ag, and rural residential. Now, this is extremely important because it recognizes that the Missoula Valley has, although it's far different from the way it was when I was a kid here, it has now become a rather pleasing mosaic of big farms, an occasional big ranch, and with a lot of small farms scattered throughout the subdivisions that spring up. I think that's very important, especially important because this recognizes that the fastest growing aspect of agriculture in the Missoula Valley are the small farms. This is extremely important. Now, oh yes, I can't let this one go by. This recognition of the importance of these small acreages, and the fact that the elements, the plan, and the map all supports this, will allow Missoula to continue to live up to its early name as the Garden City. And I think that's very crucial. I had only one question as I reviewed the elements, and this happened to be up Butler Creek. In that Butler Creek Valley, there's a rather large farm ranch. I would guess at least 100 acres, and it sits on prime soil. And the designation was rural residential. And that bothered me, so I gave Andrew and Christine's office a call. I had a lovely visit with Christine, and I said, now, suppose the owner of that large ranch wants to put it in the whole thing in a conservation easement, because rural residential suggests acreage from 2 to 10 acres. And she said, well, that's not a problem at all. They can go ahead and do that. And that indicates to me that there's going to be a great deal of flexibility here as far as agriculture is concerned. Looking at the larger places, looking at the smaller places, I think it's essential. So one last many, many thanks to Andrew and Christine and everybody who worked on this. And I certainly urge the planning board to approve this.
Thank you, sir. Okay, we'll take a few minutes here, stretch, and come back in about 5. Do you have any? Okay, everyone, in the interest of wrapping this up before February. Yeah, right. That's true. Any additional public comment on this agenda item?
You want me to start over? My name is Theodore Dubuque, D-U-B-U-Q-U-E, and I know in these things you're always going to have people who have specific interests, whether it be real estate, wildlife, and that's their only thing. Well, what I noticed here today was more of a community thing. Everyone was pretty much for this, and everyone was very thankful for all the work of Drew and his associates. So I highly recommend that we remember we're a community and we pass this as a community. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Additional public comment?
My name is Judy Matson. I'm a resident of West Riverside. I want to thank you guys for your stamina. I want to thank Christine and, of course, Andrew for all the great work they've done in making it a super document that I think we all understand and appreciate. My one small comment is that being from West Riverside, I'm in a community that's kind of searching for a way to pull our citizens together into a community neighborhood again. We lost our mill, closed permanently in 2008, and the mill is reinventing itself as industrial condominium, which is awesome. But a lot of our people still are not working there. And so I want to really put in a plug for the Live Make designation that we are borrowing from our friends in East Missoula. It's worked well for them. Andrew brought the idea to us, and they have expanded it to the numbered streets in West Riverside. I would just like to encourage that Live Make designation to be extended to all of West Riverside. It's an affordable place. If we had people who wanted to have a shop and live in the community, I think that would give us more of an identity, the kind of thing that we're looking for. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Additional comment? Yes, sir.
Yes, Brian Daigle, D-A-I-G-L-E. I'm specifically talking about north of I-90 and west of Reserve Street. Right now, on this map, it shows neighborhood residential. I'd like to see it include a little bit more commercial, as currently we already have businesses in there, Alpine Canine, and also a high-tech and a wireless company. It's a unique piece of property along that corridor. We have fiber, we have coax, we have a lot of power available that we've put money into. Not only that, it also has an active irrigation ditch that has been active since early 1900s with water rights out of Grant Creek. So it has a unique ability to have that live-work ability, similar to East Missoula, where people can actually live and whether it be harvesting a crop, some type of a greenhouse, also telecommuting to bring in people being 7 minutes away from now our airport that's doing an exceptional job with these direct flights. People could telecommute for these big companies because of the fiber and the bandwidth and the power that we have available. And with the unique ability of kind of a row house, we can get it to fit that affordable housing formula that we need in this town, because we've had the land and it's just a unique piece. So I just think we really need to look at it to maybe add a little bit more commercial to it instead of just neighborhood residential, which is great. I don't want to lose that because it definitely can provide a number of homes.
Clarification of where exactly were you talking about? I think I missed that.
So just north of I-90 and west of Reserve Street, you'll see kind of the orange neighborhood residential lot. And it's just south of kind of the tan planned neighborhood area of the Flynn Family Trust. And it's a very unique piece of property. It's been in our family for a lot of years. We've got family here, and it's a very unique piece. And I want to stress with that active irrigation, canal that has provided years ago south of the interstate. That was all flood irrigated. And in fact, Wheeler Village was a very remarkable development that an uncle of mine did years ago that was one of the first ones submitted to Washington, D.C. to provide a trailer house, but also a garden plot to keep that agricultural feel where people were providing for themselves. So it's a very, it's kind of been forgotten about, but I want to remind people back to the live, work, and being able to accommodate the agricultural, affordable housing combination. That was proven, and still to this day, you drive through there, it's been managed correctly, it's very clean, very well kept, excellent family and love underneath the roof of that. And on north of that interstate, back to the lady's comments from earlier with the rezoning, there could be a solution for that to bring in, some of these folks that need to relocate their trailer homes and stuff like that. So I just want to express that. I'd like to see a little bit more commercial and a little bit more thought where we can get some more live work set up there also. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Additional comments? Anybody? Obviously, like we said at the outset, there's going to be another opportunity if you change your mind in 2 weeks. But, okay, well, we won't close the public hearing. We'll keep it open. But say we'll probably sort of move away from this item tonight. Thanks for everybody attending, and thanks to Christine and Andrew for all of your hard work. Very much appreciated. So we'll continue this, and yeah, I think, like I said at the outset, also we'll reserve some of our discussions, of course, regarding policy issues and things like that for that next meeting. So thanks again. Okay. Yep. Yeah. Okay, so our meeting continues also. If folks could sort of keep it down a little bit while we continue going, feel free to hang out if you'd like. It's going to get very exciting. We'll move on to item number 7 on our agenda, which is communications and special presentations. We do not have any of those. Committee reports, do you have any committee reports? I don't believe so. Old business, any old business, anybody? Okay, so we'll move on to new business and referrals, and that involves officer elections for the board chair, board vice chair, and appointments to the TPCC and the Urban Growth Commission. Maybe a little bit of background about the kind of current scheme that we've been on with the board in terms of board chair and board vice chair. It used to be like an annual deal, and then between John DeBari and Dick Ainsworth and now myself, it seems like we're moving maybe into like 2-year terms for the chair. There's been some discussion with Helen and I and with Christine about me continuing on for a 3rd year. I am certainly willing and interested in doing that, but that doesn't preclude someone from nominating someone else for chair and us voting on that. So I guess I'd open that up to the board, and kind of up to you guys.
I nominate John Newman to be chair of this board.
Okay, we have a nomination. Do we need a second for that? Okay, seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
I will abstain from that vote. Okay, well, thanks, guys. I appreciate the vote of confidence, and hopefully my 3rd year is okay. Okay, then we'll move on to officer elections for the board vice chair, and in the same vein, Helen has expressed interest in serving as the vice chair again, but of course, if there are other nominations, we won't stop that process.
I'll nominate Helen Jenkins as vice chair.
I will second that nomination. Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye. Opposed? None? Okay, Helen is the vice chair for a 3rd year. Thanks, Helen. Okay, so item C, the TPCC, that's currently Dudley assigned to that committee. I don't know if he's interested in continuing on, but we probably, the discussion earlier was that maybe we should not put him on that committee in his absence necessarily.
Oh, come on. No.
Which runs contrary to what I would prefer to do, which is assign the people who don't attend the most work.
If anyone was interested, he wanted to open it up to the board.
Yeah.
If anyone was interested,
meets once a month, pretty regularly, and does exactly, I think, what it sounds like: transportation policy coordination. Right, there's the mayor serves on the committee, a member of the Board of County Commissioners, folks from Public Works, somebody from the Montana Department of Transportation. Is there somebody from the Federal Highway Administration? No. Is there? Okay.
They're a non-voting member, yeah.
Okay. So, interesting high-level type stuff if someone was interested.
It's the governing body for the Metropolitan Planning Organization. That's kind of the level of importance it's at. So,
Yeah.
I'm Karen Hughes.
High level of importance.
Yeah. I mean, for transportation planning in this jurisdictional area, that's where the decision-making occurs, other than the individual governing bodies.
And Vince, you are already a member of that committee, correct? In your
Yeah, I was just going to add, they approve the distribution of federal transportation funding to the city, the state, and the county when they have projects. So, yeah, it is important. I would be interested in serving, but they oversee funding to Mountain Line where I work. It would not be appropriate.
So if
Dudley's not interested, I would.
Okay. All right, well, then I nominate you. Do we need to nominate? It's an election as opposed to an appointment, but
If he wants to stay, that's absolutely fine. I understand that. I would respect that. But if he doesn't want to, I will.
should we wait until Dudley's at the next meeting then maybe?
I would think that would be a smart
And
thing to do.
we could always have an alternate too, in case Dudley can't make a meeting or something.
Okay, perfect. All right, well, then we'll hold that one in abeyance here until the next meeting. And then Jamie's not here, but he has been the designee for the Urban Growth Commission, and I don't know that he's had the opportunity to attend yet, so I don't know that we should take it away from him.
It is something that I would be interested in if it gets sort of revamped and, tries to implement some of the mapping and hopefully zoning in the future, but happy to defer to Jamie.
Maybe we should hold both of them off till
Okay.
Jamie's here then and have those discussions with the people that are currently appointed to attend the meetings. Sound like a plan?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yes, ma'am.
So as John mentioned, he's going to be meeting with John DeBari tomorrow to talk about land use planning. And so I just wanted to put out there that I think John will do a great job of assessing what the level of need and time investment will be with a representative from Planning Board on Land Use Planning Committee. But if it proves to be really valuable both for us and for them, I would think that maybe we would want to amend the bylaws to add LUP as a standing committee for a planning board member, so that we have somebody kind of permanently appointed, and we have kind of regular check-ins, because they're crunching through a lot of work at LUP, so it could be good.
Is there anybody on LUP besides city councilors, though? Isn't that just a city?
That was going to be my comment. I think and of course, this is assuming that, John DeBari would love that to be the case, that somebody comes like on a monthly or bi-monthly basis or something. I don't know if the commissioners feel the same way or not. And you don't need to speak for them, but maybe that's a question you could ask them and see if they want a sort of a complimentary visit from us on a regular basis.
Yeah, we used to do that at least annually, have the chair or vice chair of the planning board or like a city and a county representative visit the city and the county at least once a year, and sometimes more often than that. Also, we'll check in with them. I'm sure they'd be quite interested in having a stronger connection to the planning board, especially if a representative can come and visit with them periodically.
Okay. Well, yeah, let us know what they think, and if so, then we can put some people kind of in those positions, and then open up the bylaws, which should be easy enough, I would think. Cool. Okay. Item 11, comments from planning board members. Anything anybody has to say about anything? Comments, issues, concerns? Yes, ma'am.
So I really appreciated the woman's testimony to open up the meeting, and I'm always at a loss of words for providing resources for that. I hate being like, well, talk to your local city council representative. It just sounds really tacky, but at the same time, they're the ones that are kind of responsible for these decisions. Over the break, I was chatting with Stephanie about the possibility, and maybe this is something you can chat with John about tomorrow, about having a swap in, swap out policy for things like displacement, so that she wouldn't have to leave her home, or she wouldn't be allowed, or she couldn't be kicked out if there wasn't a place for her to go, as kind of a homelessness mitigation strategy. Because I think her point was well taken. If she can't find housing, she will become homeless. This is how this happens. And so maybe there's something that we can do from a policy perspective on encouraging landowners to kind of hold off these big projects until, affordable housing can be made available.
I kind of wonder too, at what point does the city have to be the one to, say, hey, this is an issue in our city and we are a local government, and so we need to provide like some level of housing to, sort of like flexible, permeable type. Somebody's in that situation where they're about to lose their house, and like here's sort of a temporary solution while you're looking, because it's probably no secret after however many, 8 years on this board that I'm not like a giant private property rights champion. But at the same time, there are some issues with, saying, hey, we're going to withhold a permit that you have lawfully applied for and met all of the like predicate, steps, because somebody that lives on your property is not going to have a house if you do what you're allowed to do. There's tension there. And that might be something that needs to be solved publicly as opposed to privately conditioning someone. You know what I mean? I don't know. I'm not.
Yeah, I totally understand where you're coming from, John. And I mean, obviously that's where the tension is, right? At the same time, I'm always like, we live in a society, people. Like, we can't have this happen. Like, we don't want to turn into Seattle and San Francisco, right? Like, so we need to take some proactive steps to make sure that doesn't happen.
Yeah, and excuse me.
I think we're going to see sort of a natural transition of this happening more, just because of the way the city has said we want to grow up, we don't want to grow out. So folks in the city are going to start looking at their property and saying, hey, it's worth some bucks if I grow up, and that's what the city wants me to do. So we're going to, but the thing that I think that's going to happen is that over a period of time, and I hate, this lady would not like to hear this, but it's going to level out. We can't have all rich people living here. Somebody has to work for the rich folks. Somebody has to do, the regular 9 to 5 whatever jobs, and so those people have to have a place to live, and so it's all going to have to equal out. Otherwise, we're going to have a whole bunch of stores, businesses, or whatever opening and closing because nobody can afford to live here to work there. So I think that, and I don't know how long it's going to take, but I think over a period of time that it will all sort of level out, and I'm sorry that we're going to mow over some people in order to do that. But I don't see any other way around it, really, if this is what the city wants to do.
I had similar thoughts. What we heard tonight was an extreme example, of someone with very few means to move when being displaced. But displacement is the result of a lot of upzonings. If the person who owns the property is renting that property out, and we probably all know people, maybe ourselves, who've had that happen to them, when the property is sold and rebuilt at higher density or whatever, the people there have to find another place to live. And as you said, John, it's like, whether or not those people who are currently living on that property have the means to move, that really depends on a lot of different factors. But it would be great as a society to figure out a way to help people who don't have the means to move in those situations.
I have a little different take on this scenario. It's very compassionate for the story you heard tonight. It happens all too often in this community. I think it's a number of things that contribute to that, and I think to blindly point necessarily always to the evil developer and they should accommodate and all that is a little short-sighted. I think until City Hall and the county have a top-down approach and address some of their own internal policies about land development and things, that you're going to continue to see this. We see the poorer get poorer in this community and the richer get richer. And this concept of affordable housing is always focused on subsidized housing, and it's ignoring the middle class entirely. This middle class in this community is getting smaller and smaller and smaller. And we talk about it just being a result of upzonings. It's not just a result of upzonings. It's a result of the increased cost of taxes, the constant, desire in the community for these social justices, for pedestrian bridges over reserve, for pedestrian bridges down to floodplain, for everyone needs a sidewalk. Those are all driving the cost. More red tape in City Hall, design excellence that we just adopted, that's all driving that cost. It's a matrix, and I think until we recognize that and own that, what you're going to see is all too common.
Peter.
So I think there are a couple of ways that we can address some of these issues, and one is communication between different parts of the city infrastructure. I don't know, or nor do I think that CAPS should be the site that says, here are the resources that you have, ma'am, for places to go to find housing. This is going to impact you in this way. But it would be good if CAPS had that kind of information, if Missoula Housing Authority had some way, or they had brochures about this sort of thing. We could foster communications between different parts of the city's infrastructure so that when someone is impacted by this, and maybe CAPS is in a great position to say, this is what's going to happen here. We've got this request for a zoning change, a spot zoning change, which I agree with Neva. That's an issue we really need to address. We have to have the resources at hand at the offices to pass on that kind of information. And then maybe the city will decide at some point to have a czar who looks at housing issues, low-income housing issues, and we start addressing it from different points of view and say different places can add to the conversation about how we're going to deal with low-income housing. We have friends on the real estate board. We have friends at Missoula Housing. We have friends at incentivizing things. We have, the conversation that we had earlier about, what Bozeman is doing to incentivize stuff. I think there are ways to address this issue, but I do think that overall we're going to have to address the question of low-income housing from a city point of view.
I just want to bring up one other thing. I agree that we shouldn't just look at the evil developers that are doing this, but we also need to remember that we're not looking at people of just low means. That the woman who spoke to us at the beginning, she owns her trailer. And because of the decision that's being made, the property that she owns is now being rendered obsolete. And so she's being moved from a position of really relatively owning one part and getting a really good deal on rent on another part to a position of complete dependency on a system. And so, she might have to move into subsidized housing, or she might have to be dependent on low-income housing, or these resources that we're looking at for her. And so what I would encourage us to think about, and for the city to think about too, is what are ways that we don't just need to see folks who need low-income housing in our city as being dependent on services? How can we also create situations where we're empowering their communities to help them so that they, is there a way that we could find a way to make it okay for some trailers to be used if they're safe? I think about the subdivision review that we did in over by Bonner that was going to be about that really nice trailer park. Are there ways to re-envision this where we're not just saying, okay, you're low income, so you're dependent on services, and we're going to put you in that dependency state? Not that people don't need a leg up or need a hand up, but I think also she's becoming more dependent because she's losing the thing that she owns, and it's becoming valueless to her.
I want to add one thing. I'm not going to go on too long, but somebody made the point at a presentation I was at recently, described the term of housing preservation, that it's not always about building new things. It's like that, and this is a great example of it. These are people's homes, and so I wonder about that piece, like how to think about existing homes that need to somehow be retained and not just lost. And I wonder, like I was thinking, looking at what Aaron Pehan from the city's housing office, wrote here, which was just like what I would normally say, yeah, let's, maximize density. But in this case, we're talking about actually eliminating existing homes. So to me, it's a little bit different than, say, the one on Edith, where we, added density. I think it was Edith. Anyway, maybe we could have Aaron come and speak with us, and what are some of the ideas that they're thinking about to address these issues? It's just a thought.
I was thinking the same thing, and I mean, Andrew was saying that I guess there's maybe a policy forthcoming. Again, I'm embarrassed that I don't know more about this, because how many times has this issue come up at this board? We should know more about this. You know what I mean? So maybe, I can check in with her. I see her every single day at Lewis and Clark School, so it'd be pretty easy enough to ask her, like, when the policy is sort of slated to come out. And maybe when it does, we can get her in here to kind of, coach us up on it.
Yeah, that'd be great.
I think that would be a great idea. It seems like we could do, as a community, some planning to try and better match the housing that we have with the needs of people and the incomes of people who live here. Because tonight we heard that there's a big mismatch, at least in the lower income scales.
I think out where I live, out in Frenchtown, they recently put in a little area right along Mullen. But anyway, it's lots where people can build homes and stuff like that. But they went in there and there's a trail that goes nowhere. That's asphalt trail, and there's trees along the trail, and trees are fine, I'm all for that. But there's sidewalks, the roads are paved. If you didn't have to put in curves, if you didn't have to pave the road, if you didn't have to put in the walk to nowhere at the beginning, you could get people, the housing would be a little bit more affordable, and then when they get a little bit of investment in their houses, if they decide, okay, maybe let's pave this. I happen to live in a subdivision. It's a dirt road, and I've heard that 80% of Montana is a dirt road, and so I don't think there's anything wrong with, but obviously we have these regulations that if you want to put in a track or whatever, this is what you have to do, and maybe we could lighten up a little bit here, and maybe the housing would be a little bit more affordable as a result.
Yeah, I hear what Andy and Mike are saying, and I want more evidence that that's the case. Like, if you were to shave off all of the requirements that the county or the city have for things like curb and whatever, and kept the bare minimum construction, right? You still are upwards of $100,000. There's just no way around it. I mean, land in this county is super expensive, right? So already we're not talking about affordable anything. So, let's just think about that a little bit, because, the woman that we heard today, she can't afford even a $50,000 house, right? So that, I mean, in some ways, we have to talk about access to housing, period. Whether she owns it or not, whether it's built or not, right? The other thing that I was chatting with Stephanie about was that, we had this townhouse exemption roll out for the same purpose, right? That we would cut back on a lot of design requirements and people would be able to build affordable townhomes. But if you look at townhomes for sale in Missoula, they go for like $300,000 to $400,000. So we've scaled back all the requirements, have, frankly, in my opinion, ugly housing, and then you still can't fill it with people that need it. So, I would ask for a little more evidence that that's actually the solution.
I guess I could add some stuff to that, and I don't have a lot of hard facts here or any numbers to that, but one of the things you do is you create these step-offs, I think. Whenever you create the $300,000 or $400,000, I mean, again, I think we're ignoring this middle-class element to this. The middle class who's lived in their home and owns it, and could sell it and make a step up, then opens that house up for someone else that's a step up that makes a step from that trailer park they're living in. I heard this lady say today, maybe she could afford a couple $100 more a month, if there was a lower cost apartment complex for her or something like that, there might be opportunities. All that adds significant time and money. I'm working on a project right now in the Target Range area that's going to require the developer to put in tens of thousands of dollars of dry lay sewer. And it's because it's a regulation. You've got the Target Range group that, when you drive into Target Range, says, we're against sewer and water, and we're the Target Range Water and Sewer District. I'm out there laying sewer to the tune of potentially five and six figures, adding to these lot costs, 20 grand a lot, adding to that lot cost to lay a sewer pipe that when the sewer comes, the city will never connect to it because it hasn't been used. They won't trust it because you didn't complete 17 checklist. It's just, we do all kinds of silly things that drive cost up tens of thousands of dollars. And it's reality. We could go through that in more detail, but it's real. And taxes, there isn't a bond this community won't pass. All those things drive taxes up. Taxes and costs of doing business, the cost of a gallon of milk. We have to subsidize all these things we feel and create these social injustices or balances, and that adds up. It adds up continually, and that it makes it difficult. A couple $100 a month, she said she could maybe afford, but when you start tacking that up and adding it in and compounding it, it adds up. It's real.
Well, I think one way that this board could address that, Andy, is something that we've all agreed on, and that's eliminating the spot zoning situation so that people don't have to walk in with already $6,000 to $10,000 of rezoning fees.
I agree, and I'll use an example of that. We've said that. We had talked to staff about the SD2 zoning on reserve. Time and time again, never any interest. The only thing that created interest in staff to change that was the Design Excellence Project. Another project that will add tens of thousands of dollars to the cost of development. That's the only thing that created staff's motivation, another internal project that was desired by them to create. That's what then suddenly triggered the staff to decide to get rid of SD2. But we saw Hunter Bay never went in. That never happened. We see all these projects come through. They go through this process. They muddle through it. And a lot of them get driven out because of cost or infrastructure or requirements. And it's not getting any better. The easy stuff is gone. Everything is difficult right now. Simple things are very difficult in this community. And until our community leaders decide that they're going to change that, we have a constant struggle. And as I said earlier, the poor will get poorer and the rich will get richer. And that's what we see going on, I think.
Well, all right. I guess we'll adjourn then. Thanks, guys. No, so it's a great discussion, and it's not over, obviously. It's over for tonight, but, it will continue for years and years. So, thanks all. Indeedy.